No, that's fine. No problem.
Cool. All right, Bull, thanks for coming on today. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. No problem.
Yeah, so the first man from Scotland I've had on, so thanks very much for coming on. You used to coach me, so you were the first man that came into mind, and I guess I wanted to know your story as well because you got a bit of a reputation that came with you when I first kind of met you. Some of the younger guys were telling me that you might have an interesting story, so I never knew I'd be doing a podcast one day. So I guess I just thought first man that came to mind, call up Bull. So obviously, for anyone in Ireland or in the UK that doesn't know you, it's your full name's Iain MacLean. So you went to university. I was doing my research here in Northern Arizona University. That's right.
Yeah, Big Sky Conference as it was back in the late 80s. Yep.
Okay, and then after that, you played professionally for the Murray International Livingston Bulls. They kind of had two names. This is when the
Murray International.
Murray
Yeah, Murray
International
International Metals. And
metals.
then once David Murray relinquished his support of the team, then it became the Livingston Bulls. Played in the same venue, but obviously in the early mid 90s, moving on, then that's when the sponsorship fell away. So.
Okay, and then you did a stint with the Scottish Rocks as well. Is that right? After that.
Yeah, we'd played in the Scottish League. We went from Livingston Bulls and we relocated out to Last Wade, became the Midlothian Bulls, but the essence of the team was still the same. And we played a number of years there with great success. And then, kind of randomly out the blue, there was investment. A BBL franchise popped up in Meadowbank. A place that, if you've played basketball in Scotland up until recently, you'll remember fondly. I was asked if I would consider, go back playing what was, part-time, because I was still working full-time for what was Murray International, because my career in the steel business coincided with playing for the basketball team. So I had 3 years there, still working full-time. So that was tough, but it was a final little swan song for me. I enjoyed it. There was some tough times, but it was competitive. And then the last season I was thrown in at the deep end because they sacked their coach at Christmas. So that final year, which would have been 2001, I think.
2001, 2002. I just have a note.
Yeah. And for that final 4 months, I was coaching more than I was playing. We had a somewhat competitive team. We had a good bunch of guys, and we won some games. Maybe we shouldn't have won. And it was a taster for me getting involved in the BBL level from the sidelines. So it was enjoyable and kind of whetted my appetite a wee bit for doing more coaching. And then they moved to Glasgow, and I ended up by default coaching a couple of games 2 seasons ago when Sterling Davis had to go home for a family bereavement. So I've kept in touch with the guys at the Rocks without being too much hands-on. So yeah, enjoyed it. It was good. And then back to the Scottish League again as player coach, and then had my stints with university men for what ran for about 9 or 10 years every year, which was good. And then with 2 stints with the national team senior men. So.
That's the whistle stop, but we're going to have to get into that some of that stuff a little bit more. So if we go back to, I mean, there's a lot of questions there I could ask you even on some of that stuff, but we go back to the start. I have, again, looking at notes here, because I never really asked you some of this stuff when you did coach me. Obviously, it's not the first thing you ask your coach where you were born, but you were born in you were born in Greenock, is that right?
Yeah, Greenock on the west coast, on the Clyde. Yep.
Okay, and I was born, what, 65? You probably shouldn't say that. Too late.
65,
so
55.
That makes you 93.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So did you go to school in Greenock then, or where did you go to high school?
No, I went to high school in Greenock. Cowdenhouse High School. It's no longer there as a school. Well, the building is, but it's renamed now. But that was my first venture into basketball in third year, because prior to that I was a swimmer and swam competitively for a number of years with some success. But I think I get fed up looking at the bottom of a pool at 5 o'clock in the morning. So basketball came along, and it was but that was in third year at school, just through some lunchtime interclass basketball, and that was my first involvement with the sport. So
I think if we could have picked a sport that you would have been doing before basketball, the last sport I would have picked would have been swimming, to be honest
really,
with you. Yeah. I just thought the contact, there's zero contact, unless you're swimming into people, which probably wasn't allowed.
that would have been water polo, but
Yeah,
and
yeah.
that wasn't big in Greenock in 1970. So
And come here, did you find, because I know people that swam, it's very disciplined, and you do, like you said, it's crazy early starts. It's a bit like those rowers, they get up at stupid o'clock. And did that help you with discipline anyway? Like, do you feel like that in any way helped shape the way you trained or anything like that? Or?
yeah, I think it did. I mean, ironically, my first national play senior basketball was at Paisley. And ironically enough, my swimming career was at Paisley. Paisley Amateur Swimming Club was one of the teams. And so, my parents made a big commitment, training up at Paisley, which was, a half of, getting changed into your school uniform and getting dropped at school. And then, most nights during the week, going back for senior training. So, I think it was a discipline for sure. So did that help? Absolutely. But it was tough. I got to it got to be a bit of a bind, to be honest, and I enjoyed it less. And the more sport I played in high school, and I could turn my hand to most things, then I dare say that was, it was going to stop at one point, because I got involved with rugby, and then the basketball came along. So, as you point out, maybe getting drawn towards contact sport was my thing. But
Yeah, I'm surprised you didn't end up playing rugby. Did you play up to a certain point with rugby, or did you kind of always?
yeah, I was. I enjoyed it. We had a maths teacher in school who drove us. It was funny though, because the big guys in the basketball teams, we were kind of at each other's throats in school. So, if you played rugby, you didn't play basketball, and vice versa. But that eventually kind of improved, and a maths teacher, our principal maths teacher, was big on the rugby, and former player, and played down at the Greenock Wanderers club. So he persuaded me to go down and play, and I played number 8. So they wanted me to go and play, and then even back in the 90s, I got offered. I went and tried out with a couple of decent rugby teams and got offered to go play as a winger, believe it or not. I think somebody had an idea that I would be the Scottish Jonah Lumu, but it never quite materialised. By that time, basketball was my main sport, and you couldn't do everything, Mark. So, but yeah, I enjoyed the rugby. I enjoyed most sports, but obviously basketball became a focus third and fourth year, and my PE teacher at the time was a football player, but he was from Paisley, and he got to know a lot of the kind of guys that ran the basketball, and he just loved the sport. He threw himself into it, got so many people in the school involved. We had really horrible facilities, but we had some great success and winning school Scottish Cups, and there was a flow of people from our area went up to Paisley, and again, it was a big commitment because I was going up on the train 3-4 times a week, and I stuck by that. And the Paisley guys, the basketball, it's been great because we've been sharing so many things on the Scottish Basketball Facebook page over the last few months with lockdown, and some great memories of. And a lot of the guys at Paisley, they were a great help to me at the beginning, and if not for them, then I wouldn't have went on to the States and played for as long as I did. So, but yeah, it was good times back then for sure.
Yeah, two points out of that. So the first one was, if I was going to pick a sport that I thought you would have played based on your physique, it definitely would have been rugby and not the swimming that you said. Interesting that you got some offers. I'm not surprised about that. And then the second thing, which kind of was one of the questions I really wanted to ask you, was there anyone in particular who you watched as in high school? Because I know when I got to that age, you're looking at guys that are playing in your country. It's something like the NBA obviously has an impact at this point, because what is it, the early 90s, mid 90s? Is that right?
Yeah, when I was in school,
Or
that would have been the
yeah,
early
late 80s.
'80s.
Early 80s, sorry, early 80s, yeah.
So back then, obviously, social media wasn't as it is now.
Yeah.
YouTube. So, but there was enough going around that my kind of idol and the guy that was kind of my hero in the basketball side was Dr. J, Julius Irving.
All right,
Because
yeah.
at that point, the only thing really came out of note was Converse were very active publicising their shoes,
Right.
and he was the Air Jordan of his day, publicising Converse. So Dr. J and these guys of that era in the NBA were kind of legend to us. But we didn't even see them really play very much because there was only regular basic TV then, Sky either. So you saw very little unless you were watching videotapes that you got from the States.
Yeah, because they wouldn't be on terrestrial. That's what I was thinking. Like, would they even be on terrestrial TV back then? Probably not.
Channel 4 covered the NBA finals. I think that would have been early mid 80s. It
All
was a
right.
kind of highlight program, and it grew and grew in popularity.
Right.
And then obviously along came Sky, but back when I was playing, that I remember, and guys will remember, Pontel, Pontel, was
Rings
your
a bell.
source of getting NBA and NCAA games. You could order videos and get 2 games on a tape, and
Right.
then you would wait for, like, sometimes the season was over before you got your copy in the post. But that was the way which you followed the game back then. So not completely different now. So, but
You're, what?
that shows my age.
Yeah, it wasn't in real time like it is now. You can just watch the whole thing.
No, it certainly was not. Certainly was
Okay,
not.
interesting. Um, yeah, Dr. J. Yeah, that's interesting. You picked that out. I remember when you said to me once, you're like finesse, Mark finesse, and I was like, that's definitely not my game. But obviously, that's someone you watched. He was a bit of a finesse player, wasn't he, Dr. J?
Yeah, he was a great athlete, and I managed to meet him just
Oh,
randomly out the blue one
yeah.
time, where my good lady had set up a visit to the Orlando Magic one summer holiday. The connection there was that one of the guys that used to play for Murray International, one of the best imports that we brought in, was a guy called Sam Foggin, who unfortunately passed away just a few weeks ago at 60, I
Oh,
think 63, I think he was. So for quite a few years, he was the European agent for the Orlando Magic. So a random, inquiry one time got a quick reply, and he gave us a behind-the-scenes
all right.
look, which was fantastic. And Dr. J at the time was general manager. Chuck Daly, I think, was the coach at the time. So these guys were all hanging around. So that was some years later to meet your kind of idol and shake his very enormous hands was good fun. So, but
Is he like a 6'6" or 6'8", or is he? I
six
don't even remember.
6'6" he was listed at,
He's
yeah. And
6'6", yeah.
he's a good 6'6", yeah,
Right. Yeah, he's a big body, and yeah, I think he had huge hands, a bit like Jordan.
yeah,
That was Jordan's, like that was the guy he emulated, like. So
yeah,
incredible
for
to
sure,
be able to meet
yeah.
him.
But
Um,
it's like any of these guys, they've got a presence. When you meet them, you're not a kid anymore. But you're very, very respectful. But he
yeah,
certainly had a, he certainly had a. He was a gentleman, very nice guy, but he certainly had a presence about him, which is what you would expect, from
somebody of
somebody
his.
from that stature. So
Yeah, I remember Barkley even saying that. I think he was when he joined Philadelphia. I think Dr. J was there then, and he
yeah,
said he just had some kind of an aura about him. Some
yeah.
you get
These
that
guys
from.
always do.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
fair.
absolutely.
Okay, so then so how did you get the kind of w- a lot of times when guys tell me they got an opportunity in America, it came from a national team experience. So was that your case as well, or was it something like different to that, or how did that all
Mm,
come about?
a little bit different, Mark. I'd been playing with Paisley at the time in the Scottish League, so back, mid '80s. Most of the teams, I think there was 10 National League teams at the time, of which Murray International Metals were one. But they obviously had bigger plans. They wanted to, make an impact in the British League, but weren't part of it then. So I was playing against them.
Yeah.
So, for 2 seasons when I'd made my senior debut and we're getting more and more minutes and playing more with the Paisley team at the time, it was actually the head coach of the Moray international team, a gentleman called Jody Gardner,
Okay.
who had approached me. It was one game at Meadowbank after we'd lost to them, and it just and he was very kind and said that, have you ever thought about, going across to the NCAA and playing, and I think that you could play certainly Division One, and certainly it was a very nice chat, a very positive chat, and he left it that, give it some thought. If you are serious about it, please let me know. I'm quite well connected, that I can make things happen. So as an 18-year-old, you're kind of you're gobsmacked by that, and of course immediately you're thinking and your mind runs away with you. But at the same time, the reality is, well, how does that work? So I spoke to him again and said, listen, it would be a dream. I would love to be able to do something like that. And a couple of telephone calls and one meeting later, then on his word, and I didn't realise how well connected he was, but on his word and his word only, by the time end of February came, I had 6 Division 1 scholarship offers had
Wow.
dropped through my post box. Um,
Is this
and
all?
I
Is this?
sent some
Is there
VHS
any
tape,
tape? Yeah, VH. Okay, I was going to ask you, like, is there tape involved, or is it just straight?
There was a little bit of VHS tape. There was some phone calls. There was some letters. I was working full time for the local council in the sports and recreation, so I was working. So this just ticked along until April, May time, and then you mentioned the national team part of it, but when I kind of narrowed it down, and I used Jody Gardner as a feed on this, and he was great to channel questions, and he was very upfront and very honest with me. And I think I'd narrowed it down to 2 or 3. So those respective schools sent coaches to the European qualifying tournament in Norway,
Oh,
which was my first senior tournament. So I'd have been 19, 20.
oh, okay.
Um, and the back end of that, obviously, they watched me play in what was a week-long tournament. Their scholarship offers were still there, and I suppose the tough thing for me was to just remotely try and make a decision without being able to make a school visit,
Right.
or do anything like you could do as we are doing now online. But I plucked for Northern Arizona. The coach kind of persuaded me. He said all the right things. He reckoned that because of outgoing guys that I could play some minutes even my freshman year. It was a good academic school. It was a big school, but not the biggest. And I plucked for that, and I don't have any regrets. It was an enjoyable time. It was an eye opener, but it was tough for sure. But something, if I had the chance to do it again, I wouldn't change it. I would do it for sure. It
And
was a
was
great time.
there? Yeah, that sounds. I mean, that's an incredible thing as an 18-year-old to try and get your head around. How did you feel when you got the offers? You're obviously just overwhelmed, almost surreal experience. Was there many guys like before you that had got offers in Scotland? Was there a couple of guys that trailblazed that before you even in Scotland? Like,
I,
do you
I,
know?
I'm not. I don't think so. I mean, I suppose a genuine kind of at that time a 4-year scholarship offer at a Division 1 school. I think I might have been the groundbreaker guy. I know there was guys went out on some high school exchanges and did various things. So, that's all great, and I'm sure they've had some great experiences. But for me, as a guy from Greenock, not having played basketball, I've only been playing for 3 or 4 years,
Oh,
but I really worked hard at it. And be given that opportunity, it was just too good to pass up. But going out, I thought I was in shape, and I thought that I could shoot, and I thought I could do certain things. But as I'm sure you and other basketball guys understand, that when you get to that situation and you realise you're playing Division 1 NCAA ball, you then realise that you've got some work to do. So
yeah.
it wasn't easy. It was tough. And did I get homesick? Yeah. But I stuck it. Things changed, unfortunately, for me with the foreign athlete rule.
Yeah.
So I lost financial assistance for 2 years, and I couldn't complete my degree, and it was sad at the time, but there was another opportunity, and I came back, and Jody Gardner and Murray International were still there. So as soon as I came back and wasn't going back to the States, it coincided with the Carlsberg League, and they offered me to come and play, and that's where I migrated to after being in Flagstaff.
Okay.
So no
Yeah.
regrets.
Yeah. No. Absolutely. One of the lads, Colin, he's probably again kind of he'd be on the top 10 basketball players out of Ireland ever, top 5 maybe even. And he had a similar experience. Came back after 2 years, just whatever his circumstances were, and he went and played pro in Europe or whatever he did. But so Murray International then at this point, have they kind of like joined is the BBL in existence? Because I wouldn't know what the structure of is that kind of how it went?
Yeah, the BBL as we know it back then, the British League was called the Carlsberg League because it was sponsored by probably the best lager in the world, Carlsberg. Not that we ever drunk any, of course, being Scotsmen. Yeah, the Carlsberg League, the timing of me coming back, the Carlsberg League kicked in. Murray International had been playing a lot of games in Europe, had some great success, had been down to England, went across to tournaments in Ireland, and they were desperate. And David Murray, as their founder and main sponsor, was determined to drive the team into a British format and show that we were one of the strongest teams in the UK, which we did, and then obviously using that more regular competition to improve our standing in Europe. So yeah, it was straight into the Carlsberg League first year back, and we had some great imports. We had a nucleus of some really talented home-based guys, and we had some great success those first few years, and did a lot of traveling, not just throughout the UK but throughout Europe, and yeah, it was a great number of years with some good success.
Yeah, it spans. I know there was a kind of an article, and remiss now I didn't get to read it coming on to this because they'll probably have another 20 questions off the back of it. But like without there was 2 questions there I had. So I was going to ask you to give like an executive summary of that last dance, like that article that covers for Livingston. But just before I go into that, there was something I wanted to ask you there about. It's gone from my head. Live podcast. Okay, so just to go back to the college thing before we go into the Livingston story, because it's really interested in hearing about this. When you went to college, was there much? I always ask people this because I feel like it's an important part of the jump that you get when you go to another level. And I hear this from a lot of guys. Is when you got over to college and you did play at the NCAA Division 1 level for the years you were there, did you find the I guess the strength. You mentioned your fitness as well. Did you find the S&C part of it just stepped up to another level? And but even like having to be like one of the best players in your team in Greenock to jump into that level, and then maybe like playing a role or playing the minutes that the coach wants you to have. What was that like, and did that affect your your kind of your game or whatever? Did it change things like at all, or how did that impact you?
Yeah, I mean, the strength conditioning thing was a big thing then, certainly in the US. Rocking up at an NCAA D1 school. Again, I knew that my fitness. I had access to facilities where I worked in sport and recreation. So I'd been doing my own weight training, as we called it then. S&C, but it was fairly basic. But in terms of overall fitness, on the back end of being a swimmer competitively for a number of years, then I would say that I did think that I was relatively fit, and in terms of how I played and where I played to that point. But going out to NAU, was a bit of a rude awakening. My first involvement, I went out early. The coaches invited me out about 3 or 4 weeks before school started. So I was on campus. They were fantastic. They were really welcoming, homely. Realised that I was thousands of miles away, but the only other people on campus were the American football guys on scholarship.
Right.
because their season started pretty early.
Right.
So I threw myself into the deep end, maybe stupidly at the time, but I went to do S&C with the guys for the American football team, which to say was a bit of a rude awakening would be an understatement. But the strength and conditioning guy, it was a man and wife combo. Jerry was a former Mr. Natural West Coast USA bodybuilder, ex-football player. His
All right.
wife, it was a bit of a combination. His wife was from Poland and was a former Eastern European shot put champion. So between the two of them, they really did work you hard, but they took a liking to me, and I got set up pretty quickly. And Jerry made it clear certain things that the basketball guys he often found, that was a weakness or a strength, and he knew the coach because the coach had been there a few years, and he kind of gave me an insight to what the demands would be. So I kind of got tested early on. So I had 3 or 4 weeks of kind of getting used to it. And I mean, God, it was tough. But I threw myself into it. And as I say, I had great support, even though there wasn't many people in campus. There was a lot of people around it. It was a bit unique. There's a guy from Scotland here. They were all rallying round. They loved the accent. At one point, I even had a Saturday morning radio show doing, things like Billy Connolly and airing some tape for Billy Connolly. Nobody could understand what he said, but back then, Simple Minds and a lot of the bands from Scotland and the UK were relevant to the US market. So,
All right.
but yeah, it was tough, and official practice didn't start till October. And of course, when guys appeared on campus, you know, I dare say the big test for me was that all the guys on the team, the crew of guys were, I suppose, wondering why a guy from Scotland was on a full scholarship. So I kind of avoided, to be honest, the kind of contact scrimmage stuff at night. I just did my own thing.
Right.
But then you couldn't escape it forever. And then I realised that, you know, these guys were not only quicker and better than me, but a lot of times the play was above the rim. But I suppose my confidence took a wee bit of a dent, but I stuck at it, and I'm pretty dedicated, and I'm pretty dogged, and I thought I'm not going to let this beat me. So it maybe took a couple of months, but I settled down, and then you kind of get the respect of people. And the coach had said, that at that time the NCAA 3-point line was even closer than ours. So he knew that I could certainly shoot, and he had returning guys, and he was looking for a guy that was big that could play, the 2 and 3 spot. Certainly, being able to get on the floor and working out and shooting the ball every day, then confidence levels grew even more when it came to putting the ball in the bucket, especially from the 3-point line. And by the time October official practice started, I was just one of the guys, and I just had to work hard for my minutes, and so it was still tough, but it was fine. But the other thing with a big sky school was that every school was at altitude, so we were 7,500 feet above sea level. So I quickly found out that when I went on a 10K run, that my lungs were trying to leave my body at one point. But when you return back after doing that for 3 months, you realise that when you return back to sea level, you've got a bit of a kickstart. But
Yeah, I was
no,
going
it
to
was
say.
it was tough, but it was good. It was good. Hard work pays off. So
Yeah, yeah. No, that's an amazing experience all the same. And of course, when you went back, then, well, I mean, you can see with most guys, anyone who's played at that NCAA Division One level, they tend to just be able to slot into a pro program because it's pretty much that level of organization as well. Just
yeah,
and just that level of intensity and the even the frequency of the training and the everything is done pretty much.
yep,
It's a pro league in itself, essentially.
yeah, yep.
So you came back and then started with Murray International then, and they're in the BBL. And I heard a point on a podcast. I don't know if you ever watched Hoop Fix. They recently did a round table with a lot of the UK, the BBL managers from some of the top teams. And Paul Blake from Newcastle, he had a really good line. He said, the BBL in the 80s was the G League, as in there was this was the first time Americans were looking further far afield than America. If they, potentially wasn't the right timing for it to get on a team in America, so they would actually come to the UK and also Ireland. They also came to Ireland, and we had guys like Mario Ellie who won a
Oh yeah, I remember
championship.
him.
Yeah, he came to Dublin, and a guy on my podcast who just played for University of Hartford Division 1, John Carroll. His dad played with Mario Ellie in Dublin, so he went on to with Houston to win a championship. So some other guys, there's potentially could have played in the NBA. A guy called Dior Marsh. I think he got drafted and then ended up playing in Ireland and stayed in Ireland. So there was that kind of level, and he was saying that the UK was very much like that, and it was almost a golden era. So I mean, you would have got to play with some top Americans in the UK and in Ireland, and it sounds like Murray International was kind of getting that same kind of level of American over to you guys.
Yeah, I mean, David Murray was very driven as a businessman, but he was involved in not just the basketball, but he was involved with hockey and volleyball. But the basketball was, I mean, I would say it anyway, but I'm pretty sure I'm right in saying this, that was his kind of main love. And he followed the game. He tapped into the college and the NBA stuff. He sat on our bench at every home game. And he was switched on to it, and really enjoyed it. And like he did with the football, that he wasn't short at putting his hand in his pocket. And I don't know in terms of salaries and what other import Americans were getting paid, but if you were coming over and you were looking to play in the UK and you wanted a pay packet, then Murray International were one of the teams you wanted to play for, because we were putting guys, we had car sponsorship and guys were getting put up in nice houses in the outskirts of Edinburgh, and David Murray did what he said he would do, and he would bring in a certain caliber of American, and he would look after them. And if you came in and you worked hard and you produced, you get looked after. If you came in and you didn't produce, you weren't there long. And we've had some stories. We had one guy, I think it was my third year back, that his last game, funny enough, was in Dublin. A guy called Stuart Granger, who 6 months before had played for the New York Knicks and had played pretty much half a season. And he rocked up halfway through just on a short-term contract, and we thought, what's this guy doing here? And he could play. He was a bit of an ass, and that eventually cost him his contract. But and the Roy Curtis tournament was his last game for Murray International, and he turned it on, and I think it was the final. And the guy could play, but unfortunately he had some things missing between his ears. But we had some great caliber of guys, and I think the testimony to what David did was that the guys didn't come for 1 year and go. They came, and most of them stayed for 2 or 3 seasons. And back then you could naturalise guys if they'd been in the country for a certain amount of time. So what they used to call dual national people. And again, we had that benefit, which allowed us to tool up and have some good ability at most sports. But we had some really good Americans over, and a couple of guys that come up from England as well. Because we looked after them. But it's interesting Paul says that, because back then that's kind of how it felt. Maybe not so much now, but hopefully the BBL will grow, and if it comes out of this pandemic. But I'm always keen to see the BBL improve, because it should quite rightly be part of the pathway for players from Ireland and from throughout the UK to aim for.
Yeah, there's a bit of a disconnect there, and I always find it when you start to hear about. I mean, they did a great documentary on it here, and I've totally forgotten the name of it. And it was that whole era of bringing over those really strong Americans, where the Irish League was actually better than it was, and the crowds were crazy. And I saw some of the stuff in the Facebook page for Scotland Through the Years, and I mean, the crowds again crazy for Murray International, and just around the British League, it was booming, and it was just the sport to watch. And it's just crazy how it's actually taken a step back from that. Like you think it would have kind of launched that. I think I'm not sure what the actual the ultimate kind of where it started to spiral downwards, or if it just wasn't sustainable, or I don't know if you have any insight on
Uh,
that. But there's probably theories as to why it happened, or various
yeah,
factors.
a lot of theories, but from me, I mean, not knowing the intricate details, but certainly, consistently holding on to sponsorship and good sponsorship, of which there was. I mentioned Carlsberg, but
Yeah.
NatWest Bank sponsored the league trophy.
Well.
There wasn't really a tournament or a cup or a team that didn't have, I wouldn't maybe necessarily say a headline sponsor, but if you didn't have a headline sponsor, you had a number of really good core sponsors who were supportive of the team and liked what the sport brought. But to me, from memory, the Sky TV deal was the kicker, because it was regularly on TV.
Right.
It was regularly on Sky. And as soon as and again, I can't remember exact details, but I suppose that things get embellished through the years. But whatever happened with negotiations, whatever happened with rankings and audience figures, I don't know. But the bottom line is that sponsors are great when they see their name embezzled, on shirts, courtside advertising. But if you don't get that regularly on TV, it's not so easy a sell. So the Sky TV thing must have been a big factor. And
Yeah.
after that, things kind of started to tail off. But what you might not know was that I nearly had a career in Ireland, actually.
Really, I did not know that. No, how did that?
No,
That's not on your, as to say, your online footprint or whatever. But,
no, we were often over, as national team, as Murray International to, Belfast, to Dublin, to Cork. And, it was a great affinity between Scotland and Ireland, and always has been and always will be. And, we had some great times and made some great friends. But it was just through many, visits over to Ireland that I got to know the guys at Star of the Sea.
yeah.
Bill McCotter was very heavily involved, and Bill actually made an approach if I would be interested in coming over and playing for at least a full season in the Super League for Star of the Sea. So we actually got down to talking about how we would manage it. That I would fly over on a Friday, we'd have a shoot around session, and yeah, to be honest, I was quite flattered, and I did seriously think about doing it just for change.
Yeah.
But then, how it would all kind of stack up and would be to rock up on a Friday, and for whatever reason, it just kind of quietened down a wee bit. But I was quite close to giving it a go, and I'm sure that I would have enjoyed it. The
That's
guys
great.
at Star of the Sea were great guys, and the league was super competitive. And I'm half Irish anyway because all my family are from Northern Ireland, so there was an
Good.
affinity there as well. So it,
Very
it, it
close.
became quite close, but unfortunately it didn't work out. But
It could have been a different story, yeah, if you had kind of
could have
returned.
been a different
That's
story.
crazy. So you had a McCotter. Do you know, was Brian on our team? Brian McCotter's son. He has a son, Brian. I think that's his
Yeah,
dad.
Brian. I got to know Brian, and I got to know him more when he came over to Scotland, and
Yeah.
that was at the time when I was player coach. After the Rocks thing kind of drew itself to a natural conclusion,
Ah, okay.
and I coached Brian for 1 year at St Mirren when he
Right.
was over studying. So nice guy. See that he's family man now. But
That's right.
yeah, I got to know the McCotter family, really nice family, and yeah, Brian's a nice guy, just like his dad and the rest of the McCotters. But I think I engaged with him on Facebook roughly, very briefly recently.
Ah, okay. He's
So
he's an optician, I think. He went to Strathclyde, didn't he? I think he went to Strathclyde
yeah, he
University
was
of
at one of the
Strathclyde.
Glasgow universities, so Strathclyde or Caledonia. Yeah,
Oh,
so
Caledonia. It could have been Caledonia, actually. Yeah.
one of the two. Yeah, but he was in Glasgow, and that was a good fit for him because we trained in west of Glasgow. It wasn't that far away. So Brian came and played for a year and did well for us at St Mirren when I was player coach. Towards the end of my playing career. So, but nice
Yeah.
guy, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, underage, he was. I think he got Young Player of the Year in the Super League before he left for university. He was very highly touted.
Yeah.
Um, and interesting. Okay, it's amazing. It's just such a small world again in the basketball community that you would
Of
just,
course. Yeah.
yeah. Um, okay, so I'm just looking here on the list here. So Yeah, I just looking at the guys that have gone since to college in America. So there's obviously Robert Archibald. I think he went to Illinois, and then Kieran Ochara, who's
Chara,
obviously
yeah,
he went to Duquesne, and Ali
yeah,
Fraser's gone to Maine. And there's been a few other guys since. There's
yeah.
some newer school guys that I wouldn't even know since I've left. There was a list of them there. I didn't really go through them. Um, but I wasn't sure if you were the first guy who had actually gone to that level, and it's just interesting to see. Did any of those guys reach out? Actually, that just occurred to me when they were there, or was it kind of they just kind of made their own way, or like?
No, not really.
No,
I probably had I think from memory, I had maybe a chat with one or two of them, basically, or on their behalf. But as you move on through the years, the direct communication's easier.
yeah,
Sharing game tapes easier. I know that we can all make up a great highlight reel, but things are a lot easier nowadays. It's a lot more accessible to get across the pond. So
true.
these guys, through their own contacts and guys coming across to watch them play and being able to facilitate game tape a lot easier. And they know how these guys kind of retrofit into what they're looking for. But yeah, the guys, Ali, Kieran, and all these guys that went out had their own experiences and it served them well. I'm sure they can tell similar stories to me, but it's an opportunity that yourself that there's an abundance of people in the US and elsewhere now. It's a global game, so the opportunities maybe aren't as, especially for a Division One school, as maybe not as great as they used to be. But there's there's opportunities there for people if you work
Yeah,
hard and you've got a certain skill set, a certain size. It's was anybody came and asked me about you know furthering their career and in terms of not just basketball but life in general, but going out to the States, and I would certainly encourage people still to do it because it's a bit of an awakening, but it
mm,
could do so much for you and open up so many doors if you wanted to continue playing, but just as a
a
life
life
experience
experience.
is fantastic. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
for sure.
there was something on the round table they were talking about. One of the topics that came up, and it's related to what you're saying. Just interesting to get your view on it. And I don't know how much you see it with the Scottish players, but certainly it's happening a lot in England as well. I don't know how aware you are of this, but there's a lot of players that are kind of going to America in the UK at the moment, particularly some of these guys in English clubs underage,
Yeah,
and they get to
yeah,
16, 17, and uh, maybe because the BBL at the moment, like we said, it's kind of almost fallen from those golden era days, and doesn't necessarily have the money or necessarily the pathways for development. Like you said, the disconnect. So the first
yeah,
place they will look is still kind of the basketball mecca. Let's be honest. Like America still is that kind of has that draw, and
sure.
they talk about the fact that some of these kids get to go to they're really talented, get to go to high level schools, but then other ones get put into programs or situations that aren't great at community college in the middle of nowhere, and they're kind of left to kind of fend for themselves, and it's not a great situation. They return back a year and a half in, and I don't know if you have a view as to an ideal situation where British basketball would be able to develop players here and have a pathway to. And there's a couple of guys that have done it. And actually, I don't know if he's playing the year that we were doing the Aberdeen or the English unis or Scottish unis, but there's a guy in the Leicester Riders that didn't go to America that I'd say could have been a Division One player, Jamal
Hmm.
Anderson. I don't know if you
Oh
recognize
yeah,
that
yeah,
name.
yeah, 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 yeah. I
Like
do. Yeah,
really, really athletic, almost NBA athletic. And he played against us underage. I think he ended up going to the Australian League and playing there. And like really, really could have been I'm sure a fantastic player in college, but didn't go that route. And the Riders kept him in the UK, developed him, let him go to Australia, got better, and now he's coming back in one of their
yeah,
top players. And I think he's well looked after, and they've got a pretty good setup down there as far as I can see. They seem to have a foundation and a community in the Leicester area and a good following and stuff like that. So they're kind of building on that, and they're saying it's sustainable that the way they're doing it. And then Glasgow seemed to have kind of taken in their Scottish players and kind of pulled them back in as well, and that was really nice to see from my point of view.
yeah.
Did you have an opinion on that, or do you just kind of think if they want to go to America, let them go to America, or would you have a vision as to how you would like to see British basketball? Or on
Yeah, I
that?
mean, I think, I mean, going back to what I said, I mean, I suppose I was fortunate that there was a US coach with some credibility, and he was the kind of he was a cheerleader for me. I'm sure there's been a few people like that have the same happened to them, but as you mentioned, there's some horror stories. I mean, I've heard through some friends and acquaintances through basketball that I went out in a high school exchange through an agency, and they've had a horrendous time, and it's been a bad experience.
Mm,
I just think maybe perhaps that in terms of, especially since pre 2012 with the GB team, getting a world ranking, pulling everything together to make sure they could compete and play in their home Olympic Games in 2020, and sorry, in 2012. It's that old legacy question. So, what is the legacy of 2012 London? Where are we in terms of basketball? I really don't think that
yeah.
much has changed. I think the British League is an absolute must. I think getting it on regular TV is an absolute must. I think the product is decent. I really do. If I've got one cynical view of it, I think that the BBL is a BBL style, and I don't like it. And I've voiced my opinion on that, and there's the people that agree and don't agree. That's fine. It's all about opinions.
Yeah.
But I think there's enough.
When you
Enough
say
talent.
style,
Yeah.
when you say style, Bull, do you mean like in the way that the teams are kind of put together, or do you mean like there's a particular style of basketball based on just having two Americans or not having young British players, or what do you?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose back when we played British League-wise, that you would always fundamentally, every team would have a really good athletic big. You know, you would class as an out-and-out five. So a guy back to basket that would get you some easy scores, do the dirty work, rebound the ball, block shots. And I think that the natural progression of the game, with more emphasis being on the three-point line, that
Yeah.
you kind of the global game has went away from that. So that's not a criticism of the BBL, but I think then we get overloaded with guys who just want to shoot, uh, who want to create, ball screen, pin down screens. I think that the BBL, sometimes the games become a wee bit too one-dimensional for me, and I've seen enough of them. I've commentated in some games, um,
Yeah.
and I don't really see that the game has changed that much. I think then that a lot of the teams then recruit similar type players, and in a lot of cases, the imports and the so-called better players kind of cancel each other out.
Right.
And then if you don't have a strong bench and you don't have any input or involvement from the domestic-based players, then that's where the game and the quality sadly lacks. But I think there's enough there for the BBL to move forward. Of course, the challenge is post this pandemic is how financially stable are the clubs going to be. Um,
Right.
I just think that the BBL, the governing bodies, the GB, that somehow we should have and could have done a better job, post 2012, to try and really have a proper pathway, not only if kids want to have the American experience, but there's also great academic schools in Spain, for example. Not talking about going out as some guys have done to play Division 3 in Italy. Well, that's no better than the Scottish National League, but to give them good quality competition, but be able to facilitate them back into the British game. And I just think somewhere along there that, we've missed a trick.
Mm.
We can't always blame sponsorship, we can't always blame TV, but there's fundamentally something not quite right. And if you look at, the Glasgow Rocks, as great as an organisation as it looks, and I support it. They've been part of my life in terms of playing and an opportunity towards the twilight of my career. I wish them well. I really do. It's a shame the way the season, finished this year, because they could have went on and potentially won some silverware. But again, they've started an academy, but it's an academy based with all respect, with players that don't even play National League in Scotland. They've got to start somewhere. I get that, but to make an academy work, you've also got to have some money. I get that. So a lot of the times with the BBL, the money's spent from the top down. Um, so it's very cosmetic the further you go down. So what impetus, what real momentum and impetus does that have in the program moving forward? I don't know. I don't want to be too critical of them because I'm sure that they are trying to do the best they can. And
Yeah.
but I think somewhere that has become a little bit disjointed. But there's enough good kids around, enough good athletes that that there should be a flow and there should be more players involved domestically within the BBL than they are currently. And the Glasgow Rocks were a bit different because the national team, the two involvements I had, we managed to galvanise a bunch of guys. We got Kieran, we got Gareth, we got Ali, we got Johnny Bunyan, we got all these guys together, and we're a national team to be proud of, and even and again I won't shy away from it. I thought that myself and the people involved at the time, we pulled together a group of guys, and that was the starter of the success that they had in the Commonwealth Games. And that was the main reason, let's face it, why they were all pulled back and galvanised under the Glasgow Rocks banner. So it was great for the Glasgow Rocks. The guys have stayed and they've got some good success. But where is the next Kieran Achara's, Gareth Murray's, Johnny Bunyans? Where are they? Your
Yeah.
probably guess is as good as mine.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I
That's
mean, that. So, what year was it? Because I think I have it here actually. The year you coached the men's team was. I thought I had that written down. Yeah. Was it?
that would have been the first stint was 2008, 2009, and then the second stint was 2014 to 2017. But then it was a bit sporadic. We got some invites, went to some tournaments. We played the Small Nations.
Mm,
Of course, when it came to Small Nations, we couldn't play the GB guys, which
right. Oh.
wasn't great in one regard, but it gave
Right.
opportunities for other people. So, but we were curtailed a little bit.
Okay, I didn't realize that. Oh yeah, no, actually I did. Someone told me that. Yeah, so you couldn't play Kieran Ochara and you couldn't play
Gareth.
Gareth Murray as well. Okay,
Yeah, and Ali was kind of injured, was kind of
right.
involved in the
Ali
GB
Fraser.
program because I pushed these guys because Kieran was getting a look in because of who he was and where he was, but I took direct responsibility to bang the door at GB because I felt very strongly about Ali and Gareth in particular, and also Johnny. That these guys have been planning their trade, in terms of domestic. Why are they not getting an opportunity to go down to even GB camp?
Right.
And eventually people listened, and I'm not saying it was down to me, but I certainly, I was given an opportunity at GB level, and I know how that came about. So I certainly, I was the head coach of the national team at the time, so I was certainly going to bang the drum, and the guys that laced them up and worked hard for me, then I thought quite rightly so that they deserved a chance, and eventually Gareth and Ali in particular got opportunity, but and pushing them in one regard didn't help the national team because we couldn't play them in the Small Nations, and people would automatically assume that if these guys had played Small Nations, we would have won it.
Right.
You never know. I would like to have thought we would have done, but I did think we could have won it without them, but that didn't quite happen. But that's all down to budget and preparation. But we had a good bunch of guys. I enjoyed working with them. We worked hard. We won won some games that people didn't expect us to win. We had a real good nucleus of a group of guys, and it was good, and I was really delighted to see them do so well in the Commonwealth Games, which was the nucleus of the guys that I worked with, a year or two before. So, but
Yeah. Yeah, that was an incredible Commonwealth Games. It was great to, like, I mean, it almost fans out. Like, I don't want to compare it to the Irish situation because it is different, but I feel like when I talked to Michael Bree was with the first, or he wasn't the first guy actually. There was two other guys before him. He was the first guy that I knew anyway. There was went to a Division One kind of school, and then there was multiple guys from my generation, and just before that, then they ended up going to Division One schools, and they all came back and formed part of the national team, and
Yep.
you could see that with your guys. There was a bunch of lads that after you had gone, maybe, and then it kind of fans out a little bit, and there's 3 or 4 guys that have gone, and then the team's a bit stronger, and then that kind of culminated in a fantastic Commonwealth. And I know you weren't involved at the time, but you must have been loving that, having just coached them the year or two before that, to see that
Yeah.
success with those guys.
No, I was pleased for everybody, but mainly the guys, because
Yeah,
most of them I'd worked with and got to know. Some of them I knew pretty well anyway, but I got to know the kind of larger group, and we worked them pretty hard for 2 or 3 seasons, when we could and when we were with them. And a lot of people had commented and asked me about, how do you think they'll do? And it's a tough group, and I said, listen, they will beat England. There is no question. We had England up in Meadowbank the 2 years before or the year before, and okay, it was it was it was teamed up with BBL guys. Did they come up with a strong team? Yeah, they did. Did we give them a beating on 2 days, 2 consecutive days? We did. In my mind, I said to people quite openly, listen, if the team that they've got, with the coaching crew they've got, go down and they don't turn England over at the beginning of the tournament, then I will be shocked.
shocked.
So I wasn't in the slightest bit surprised. I was delighted for them. It's okay thinking and having confidence about going to win a game like that, because there was pressure and it was a big event for a lot of people. But it's then you got to go and make it happen. But I wasn't in the slightest bit surprised about the win against England and then how well they did, and got some great credit for finishing fourth. But again, like we said, Mark, it's a bit like what happened after 2012. Well, what happened after 2018?
That's true, yeah. And it's interesting because I was in London at the time, and there was a lot of the social media, and then I'm at runs with a lot of the guys who play in the BBL and National League Division One in London, and they're all shocked. They're all like, "What the hell? England just lost to Scotland in the Commonwealth," and of
Mhm.
course. Some of them got it because they knew those guys were on the Glasgow Rocks, but a lot of them were, especially the guys in the Division One guys, which I was playing against during the summer, they didn't get it at all. And of course, because I knew the guys, I knew how talented they were. When I went to watch the game, I was kind of just like you, kind of half expecting them to. I said they could definitely win this game because, especially the fact that they played together in the Glasgow Rocks and done so well with the Rocks, I thought
Yeah,
these guys could actually quite easily do very well. And I think they
yeah.
played Nigeria. Was that one of the other teams?
Beat Nigeria, yeah, which was
Which
another
is
big scalp for them, but
huge win. Yeah,
a
yeah,
big,
it was
big, big
incredible.
win. But
And to see obviously Kieran there as well, but some of the other lads play just at that. Like Gareth had a fantastic game, but to see him play at that level, and I almost felt like sometimes with GB, and this is nobody's fault, that he almost didn't get to play that almost key role that he played with Scotland, and he has that kind of talent. You could always see that with him. Um,
yeah,
and even Kieran, sometimes you kind of wish he just got some more minutes with GB in some of those bigger games when they had like a Dang and Pops Mensah and those guys. I kind of, you could see, especially just those 2 guys that played on the team. I can't remember
yeah.
if Avali featured much in the GB team. I can't remember some of the games.
No, he didn't, because he had a bit of an issue
Injury.
with the program, because
Ah,
he hurt. So he continued to work out with us as a national team, and I think again that some of the driver and some of the big issues are that when you get hurt, how do you get unhurt? How do you recover? And even
yeah.
part of a GB program, I'm astounded that when you're at that high level of sport, in your chosen sport, and you don't have any physio backup, any access
Mm.
to a consultant. There is to some degree, but because Ali was part of the squad, but not really an integral part of the team at that point. But I think would have pushed on. Um, he went through a very frustrating period of a number of months where he didn't get any real assistance from certainly from GB, from what I can tell. We tried to give him as much support as we could from the basketball in Scotland, but again we were very limited in terms of resources. He eventually got there, and I think that if you reflect back on how well Ali has played in the past 2 years, in particular in the BBL, and the numbers that he's put up and the minutes that he's played, I think that that's great credit to him, and he showed himself to be a very important part of the Glasgow Rocks, but also a very successful player in the BBL, just like Gareth and Kieran, and also Johnny Bunyan at the same time. But I think if Ali hadn't got hurt, I do honestly believe, because of his ability to get him down the floor, he really worked in his outside game. I think that year in particular that he would have pushed himself into that 12, and
Yeah.
maybe his game might have fitted more minutes in that programme than maybe Kieran. And
Yeah.
that's not a slight on Kieran's abilities, but it's fitting the right people in the right spot against the opposition at that time, and the style of play, and so on and so forth. But Ali unfortunately went down with that injury, but he's recovered from it, and he's shown his worth in the BBL, and certainly with the Glasgow Rocks, and that's all credit to him. So
Yeah, I mean, you can see it. You can see it with all of those guys haven't played at the Rocks, but also individually just haven't played at that level. All of them, and some of the other guys there. I know there was a couple of other guys that stood out for me as well, that were playing there that they could more than handle themselves. And there was, you can see that there is. I know you said the legacy stuff, but there is some good younger players there still coming through. Now, how many of them I don't really know, but it was just it was nice to see them just do so well, and just get it. Everyone could watch it, because we're in this era where you can stream everything, and they got that kind of recognition, or whatever, that kind of acknowledgement from the public. So I thought that was pretty cool.
yeah, those guys, all, there's a lot of them, not Gareth, but Kieran, Ali, Johnny, Fraser Malcolm, these guys, all came from the Falkirk Fury Club, and
Right, yeah.
always a kind of rival to John Bunyan and Falkirk, but you have to give them credit, because these guys came through the programme, and it's not to say that that's the only programme. There is some really good club teams, and there's a lot of people like there's in Ireland working and tirelessly behind the scenes to be competitive, and giving kids of all ages opportunities to play the sport that we all love. And there'll always will be people that rise to the surface, but there's not enough of them. So the BBL, the Basketball League in Scotland and Ireland, we have to really get back around the table and focus on how do we really develop the top athletes, the top players, and how do we give them the platform to not only play National League and play minutes as I did as a 17-year-old, because now the young guys coming through don't want to sit on the bench and get 2 minutes. They want to play or not. They would rather be, what is it they call it, open or closed mindset. So a lot of these young guys, they'd rather go to a lesser team with respect and play big minutes and be the man than work their ass off at a higher level and bide their time and work for the minutes and develop. So it's that closed mindset, and how do you eradicate that? You can't, but that's when it gets down to good organisation, strong people, strong coaches, strong clubs. But there's enough young talent there, but there needs to be more of it pushed through.
Yeah, there's definitely an accusation out there, the kind of generation now of the immediacy of everything for younger players. If they don't get it straight away, I suppose it's up to the person in charge, the leadership, to say, we like you, we think you'll feature on the team, but you still need to stay with it. I mean, there's a young guy on our Super League team, and I just try and encourage him to do the same thing. I won't go into detail in case he knows I'm talking about him, but like, essentially, it's that same, like, I want to play, or and every young player wants to play, but I mean, it's just getting that balance. But yeah, we've gone way over 45 minutes, by the way, but that's brilliant. That's what that's what it's all about. So there was other stuff I wanted to. Oh yeah, just on that point, then, I had something here like GB versus Scotland. Like, is there ever a case where you would just have just a separate Scottish team, or like, I mean, was there ever a thought in your head? I mean, I know. So you played. One of the things was you played. I see you had 51 caps for GB, and did you have a different? So there was obviously the Scottish team, and there was the GB team. Do you ever feel like,
Yeah,
oh, we should have our own Scotland team, or do you like the fact that there's like the GB team and the Scotland players can then kind of play for
I
both?
think I think it's part of a pathway that, in the way that the world game and obviously FIBA and European qualifications and Olympics and major tournaments, that naturally the GB team was always going to be very relevant. Back when I had my stint in terms of caps for GB were back really around the season 1988 and then 1992, because back then um, we only ever got together every 4 years, so that limited
Ah,
my number of
okay,
caps, because you were thrown together as a GB team. They nominated a GB coach or coaching staff. You were invited to camp, went through the selection process, and then off you went to a
tournaments.
tournament somewhere in Europe, because for the Olympic Games, the pre-Olympic qualifying tournaments, then I think it was there was only 6 teams in Europe that could qualify to play in the Olympic Games. So when you consider then, Germany, France, Italy, Greece, etc., it was a big ask for GB to break that dominance and get in that top 6.
Right.
Um, Nowadays it's different because you're playing home and away. Um, you're together a lot more. Prep's a bit better. Obviously, finances are again a big issue, but the dynamics of the GB program are a lot different now than they were back when I last played in '92. And in fact, the sad thing of all was that when they were trying to get things together prior to London 2012, there had been real no GB men's team since I last played. Um, that
Right.
was the sad part of it, and I suppose that was a big pressure that GB basketball were put under, because you know if we'd have hosted the 2012 Olympic Games and not been able to play in the basketball tournament, we may as well just have stopped. But
Stopped.
we
Yeah.
had to go and get a world ranking, and again, great credit to the guys that played and the coaching staff and all the people involved. They had a game plan. They worked hard to make it happen. They got a ranking, and I think they got ahead of schedule. And then obviously they were in a situation where they could take up that home invite and play, which to the guys that were lucky enough to walk out in that Olympic stadium and wear the GB vest at Olympic Games. I mean, will that happen again? I'd like to think so. Will it
Okay.
happen in my lifetime? I'd like to think so.
Okay.
Um,
I
but
thought you were going to say no there.
there's I hesitated, but I would like to think so, Mark. I'm sure as basketball people would all like to think so, because that would be the pinnacle for a
Yeah.
lot of players. So we should aim for that. That should be
Mm,
the
it's
end of
true.
the rainbow kind of tournament. And if we stop aiming high, then we'll just be mediocre, and we'll never attain to anything. But I would still like a home nation, a Scotland national team. I do think that's part of the pathway that's been taken away because of FIBA and GB and what was signed up to. Will that change? I don't know. I'm not directly involved now, but I would personally would like to see some form of national team activity for Scotland, for Northern Ireland, for England, that would help bridge that gap, would be part of the pathway, as I keep saying, and I think it's an important part that is missing.
Yeah. Because
Again, it gets down to money, but make
mm,
it happen.
yeah, and it provides opportunity for guys to step up and at least get asked to the trials and because
Yeah,
they're, as you said, they're missing a trick. Had maybe you not reached out and helped the guys, the guys you mentioned, like given that push to try and get them in, like they might not even give them a look, which is a shame
yeah,
because when they're able to compete, they should be trying to represent and there's so many guys in England, obviously, so that's the thing, and then. But you've got to look at the GB is GB, right? So it needs to be everybody that you're looking at. And you're missing talent,
yeah.
right?
It's a talent pool, and I remember eventually perseverance paid off, and Kevin Pringle, who's still the CEO of Basketball Scotland, and myself managed to get a bit of airtime with the guy from GB who came up to or was up in Scotland, and we didn't let him go without having a chat about. And I remember the night distinctly where it was a case of drilling into what I was thinking and why that other guys should be considered. And, I'd said, listen, this is not an interview about Iain MacLean. I happen to be in a volunteer position and very proud to have played and now been a head coach of the national team. But I'm telling you that I'm really pissed off that these guys, are not getting at least an invitation to training camp. I'm telling you that if you invite these guys to training camp, the coaches will not be disappointed. And you can take my word on that or not. And Basketball Scotland and I kept chipping away, and they got the invite, and then it was over to that was the easy part. The hard part was the guys getting himself to training camp and
Getting
putting
in
himself
shape.
in the shop window, and then putting himself in a situation where pick me, select me, I won't let you down. And so it was an effort that was paid off by everybody. And but if you believe in people and they believe in themselves, they should be given an opportunity. And I know the talent pool's bigger south of the border, but open your
Yeah.
eyes and look, well, and look up north and look elsewhere, because there's some really good talented players, some good athletes around, and they just need to be given an opportunity. And if it takes somebody like me to push them, then that's what I'll do.
Yeah, and that's great. But you probably had the haven't played at that level. You were probably held a bit more gravitas than someone else. It's nice that you kind of were able to help the next generation just because of your experience. Because you've seen it, and you looked at those guys and you knew they were talented enough, so you thought,
Yeah,
I'm going to
absolutely.
push. Yeah,
And
that's
then
really good.
there was no bad going to come of it. So if I was wrong, I was wrong. I certainly don't think I was. But as I said, it was then up to the guys to step into the pressure pot squad sessions and be competitive, which I knew absolutely that they would be. And as I say, aside maybe some selection issues and a bit of injuries, then I'm sure there'd be more GB caps given out. But the guys that have been involved have done themselves proud and done GB proud, and had a great experience at 2012, in particular. Robert Archibald, who unfortunately is no longer with us, which is really sad. And Kieran in particular. But let's hope there's another opportunity for GB to compete at a major tournament, and let's get it done.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree. Like just because I spent so much time in the UK and just watching GB basketball, it is you want to see them do well. You just do.
Mm,
And
yeah,
like again, we're Ireland are in small countries, so it's kind of like just not the same level. But just to see Scottish guys on the team and some of the guys in the UK that are in England that I know as well,
yeah,
just them doing well. It's good to see because people put so much effort in.
yeah,
And I think there was something somebody said that they really have to stop looking at the sport like almost like a charity sport run on the side and try and make it more like a business. But yeah, like there's so many factors that go into it. It's a whole nother conversation. So we
yeah.
won't
The
get into that. But
arguments, the arguments at various level with the funding. You know,
funding, yeah,
I was part of the GB thing. I went to many meetings prior to galvanising the team both on and off the court moving forward, as part of Basketball Scotland's kind of group, down in various meetings. And I think maybe the biggest mistake they made was that there was a certain gentleman who stood up and made an announcement and a presentation and confirmed that the GB men would medal in 2012. Now,
mm,
I think that the vast majority of people in the audience that day nearly fell off their seat. Um, so I know that it's great to set the bar high,
yeah,
and maybe that had to be said to get the funding that
okay,
the program needed. I think realistically that we were gobsmacked by that, but regardless of how that all came about, to then get zero funding, or pretty much zero funding, and as well as, even you look at the GB women, how well they've done, and the GB men have had some credible performances in the last couple of years, for the funding to be next to nothing, I think is appalling. Just
scandalous.
as a basketball guy, I think it's appalling. I don't know the political ins and outs of it. It needs to get sorted. I think basketball, as a sport and a whole number of different levels, brings so much to the table, and we've just got to keep, chipping away, and hopefully somebody sometime will listen, and we'll get a consistency of funding so that we can we can make a difference in academies and support the BBL franchises and bring in better quality players. You know, there's so many things that is money driven, and I know it's tough on the owners to keep chipping away and to make money as a BBL owner. I'm sure is impossible. I'm sure it's a love rather than and a passion rather than a business.
Yeah.
But I tip my hat to them, and hopefully the BBL will be stronger coming out of this pandemic, and we can somehow pen a vision together and move forward as a sport. I really do hope we can do that.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And just on one of the points you made, I remember it was just like they're kind of a bit sensationalizing some of these headlines, but like they're saying like there was more money given to the skeleton, which maybe 1%
Yeah,
of the population was given than there was to basketball, like a lot more. And the argument is the participation levels in basketball are second to only to soccer.
yeah,
And maybe that's just because it's one of these sports that recreationally everyone kind of has a basketball hoop in their house, even the people
yeah,
that don't play.
yeah.
And maybe the reality is people that play organized basketball is a lot less than that.
Mhm.
I can't really figure that one out, but yeah, the funding side of things is tough because when you go into a pandemic and you're being sponsored as a basketball team, and the number of people that come and view the games these days, it just isn't there as well. So
Yeah,
you're talking about the viewership's down, and then it's a bit of a chicken and egg with the funding situation. So
yeah,
there's a lot of things to think about, and it's hard to unpack in a podcast. But there's also a sentiment now. I saw some stuff coming out that we need to also stop just blaming the funding and everyone should try and do their
yeah.
little bit to kind of
Mhm.
push the sport forward. So
Yep.
yeah,
Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
yeah,
you've got to reflect back, and you've also got to be critical on yourself. I mean, I haven't been directly involved at any level really for a couple of seasons, and that's just down to some family health issues and just taking a wee break. But I'd certainly be keen to be back involved, wherever that is. I don't know. There's nothing that I'm planning to do at the moment. I don't think anybody's got any plans because of the
COVID,
crazy
yeah,
situation we find ourselves in just now. But I wonder. I was speaking to somebody a few weeks about it ago about the matchroom involvement. With the Hearn family.
yeah,
That thing is now 2 seasons that they've been directly involved in sponsoring that pre-season tournament, which is juggled up the rules and introduced the 5 point spot. And
right, okay,
it's been a breath of fresh air. And anything that Matchroom have done with darts, with snooker, with boxing, it's went from strength to strength. So
true,
I would hope that maybe something like that with their connections, if there's a buy-in that basketball could grab onto that shirt tail and ride it along and develop and get more airtime. So when that kind of opportunity in terms of TV comes along, I think you've got to really grab it, galvanise it. But yeah, we've all got our own part to play, and I just think that in some areas it's still a bit disjointed. But there's enough good people out there, enough good people in terms of coaching and driving clubs, and certainly enough players to pick from and people playing the game, and maybe that we just have to knock our heads together and start again with some things. But I'm hopeful.
yeah, yeah.
I always remain hopeful, and it's cup half full kind of approach to it. But
Yeah,
um,
it has
but
to be. Yeah,
yeah,
it has to be. Yeah, I totally agree. And I think you're right about the disjointed part needs to be. Like in any sport, you kind of have to approach it by reaching out to everyone you can who's involved that can help and get everyone's opinion. And yeah, there seems to be one of the complaints or the sentiments I get is from the people in charge at the top. There was a bit of a disconnect with people who are actually involved in the game versus the business management aspect of it. And I don't know if that's gone away yet because I'm just not that into the close to it, I suppose. But it's certainly something that the more discussions you have, like I'm not doing this podcast to change things in general, but I'm just trying to, have discussions with people and try and find out as much information as possible. Hoops Fix is a great one. They do a lot of chats. I'll send you the link to the one
yeah,
with
do
the
that.
the
Yeah,
top five owners. They had some incredible conversations about the British League and
Yep.
where basketball needs to go. And they talked about competing in Europe, and they mentioned like owning your own arena is a big thing because you're not paying the lease. It's £9,000 a game or something crazy like that. So like building your own arenas is probably something that you might overlook, but that they said that's a big factor if you can
Yeah.
build your own arena. And just some really fundamental points about how you would actually grow the game sustainably from a financial point of view, which is the biggest problem. It seems like
Yeah.
you know.
I mean, even back when I returned from the States, that was one of the first things that we had, which was groundbreaking. We had our own venue, the
Well,
Forum in Livingston, and
yeah,
basically it was a warehouse shell.
that's
So the
right.
idea was that if basketball was no more, you would just cut out the inside and you could turn it into whatever you wanted. But it had two banks of seating. There was just over 1,000 people on either side. A great floor. Um, you know, FIBA standard baskets, a function area, a weights room, a couple of social areas, and some changing facilities. It wasn't a big spend. It wasn't extravagant, but it ticked the box and it was unique. And back then in the Carlsberg League days, we were, I think from memory, we were the only team that really had our own venue. And even now, when you look at the Rocks, the facilities in Glasgow are great, a lot better than they are anywhere else in the country, which is a sad reflection on our, if you look at Edinburgh as our capital city and even Aberdeen where you were.
Right. Yeah.
Um, but I don't know what the involvement is with, Glasgow Life, Glasgow City Council, but I wouldn't imagine that setting up the Emirates, whether it's the main arena or one of the side arenas, because it's a fantastic facility.
It is. Yeah.
Um,
It's
but
fantastic.
I wouldn't imagine that that's cheap.
No. No.
But seeing Newcastle having their own facility, I think Leicester have got their own facility, and certainly that's the way that teams are going. If they can get some longevity with some sponsorship, get some buy-in from business people and support from the local council, and they buy into the community aspect that basketball can bring, then it's a great step forward, as can be seen with, I think Leicester, was it last year or the last 2 years that they've actually jumped into European competition,
Yeah. That's right.
and have not had great success. But the fact that they're in the
Trying it.
competition is, to me, is a step forward. So yeah, I can understand why the BBL owners would want to expand their targets into Europe as well, because that's what we did when we were at Murray International and European Cup, Korach Cup, and played some great games. And people often, again, people had forgotten, but we actually won the World Invitational Club Basketball Championships way back in the early '90s, which
Really.
astounded. I think David Murray at the time suggested that he got more front page headlines and got more uh, bucks per word sponsorship about Murray International and the basketball team in one weekend than they ever did in 6 years. Because it made the front
Crazy.
page of the national media, the fact that we'd beaten the Russian Olympic team, and then I think Bayern Leverkusen in the final, who I think they'd got to the European Cup final the year before, but we had to pre-qualify for that tournament because they were doing everything they could to keep us out of the tournament at Christmas. Little did they know that we were going to go win it, which
That's
stirred a few
crazy.
people up.
I didn't know that. No, you never mentioned that before. So, so
So
that that was a World Club Championship, was it?
it was an annual tournament. It was called the Phillips Invitational. It was always
Okay.
hosted at Crystal Palace over the Christmas New Year period. And they had some great teams, Milan and Maccabi Tel Aviv, and that was a tournament that was regularly on TV. I mean, I grew up watching it on TV, and because the Carlsberg League and because of the success that we had and winning the league and the playoffs, that they couldn't really not invite us, but they tried not to.
Right.
So they put us in a qualifying group where they played two games. We played an EBL team, Brixton Top Cats,
Yeah.
and then they threw us in against São Paulo, who were the Brazilian champions. We beat them both, and then the rest is history. We went on and won every game, and we blew out the Russian team in the semi-final, which just astounded everybody.
Brilliant.
Um, and that was the World Invitational Club Basketball Championship. So that was great. Kudos for for Murray International, for David Murray, for us as a team, but it was also great kudos for the game in Britain, the game in the UK, because nobody had won it,
Oh.
from the home countries, and it was a great scalp and a great credit for us to go win it, and we celebrated in some style, I have to say. So.
And that was in Crystal Palace. That was where that happened all the time, every year.
Yeah, it was an annual tournament in Crystal Palace National Sports Centre, is where it was hosted. Yeah, every year.
Cool. I'd love to see some footage. If I don't know if you have any footage from back in the day, but I would love to.
I don't think I've got some VHS tape somewhere. There must be a game tape of that tournament, because the highlights of the game against the Russian Olympic team, who had just won the gold medal at the Olympics, and the final actually featured on a sports program called Grandstand on Friday, I think it was. So it was shown delayed live on the Friday. And in fact, there was a couple of comical moments in the game, which I wondered if ever would turn up in Question of Sport about what happened next. But I don't know if any of the guys, I maybe should shout out on Facebook on the basketball website and ask if anybody's got some footage. There must be some somewhere. I unfortunately don't have it, but yeah, there's some game tapes from back in the day, but you'd have to convert them from VHS
to digital. Yeah, I know. Yeah,
digital,
there's a lot of people. There's guys. There's a similar Irish chat, or not chat, but like a look back, group, and they're digitalizing a lot of the old games. So I'm getting to watch some of the guys from back in the day, and I think some of the stuff you guys would be doing, or Matt was doing, I think he was trying to do something similar with the documentary or something. But I don't know if he's reached out to you about that, but I'd be excited to see that.
A couple of guys reached out. In fact, I can't remember the guy's name, but I got a message from somebody on your side of the pond, had said, found a press cutting and didn't know that you were the MVP of the Roy Curtis tournament in 19 such and such, and I'd actually forgotten myself. But he'd sent me an article from, it must have been one of the Dublin papers, and it was the year one of the last years we were over with Murray International. We didn't have any full-time Americans, but we brought in two American Irish-based guys who were over and playing in the Super League, but they weren't in the tournament because our team wasn't playing. So we picked a couple of guys up. I don't think we played them very much, but I think we lost narrowly in the semi-final, and even though we didn't play in the final, I was chuffed. I mean, I couldn't believe it, but I get the MVP, and I honestly had forgotten all about that until somebody reached out and shared a press cutting with me that I'd been the MVP of the Roy Curtis tournament, which was a really favourite tournament for a lot of people, and around about November time, and we were there every year, so it was a great tournament for us.
And was that in Dublin every year? Was it?
It was in Dublin every year, in Chicore, in the little hall.
The Oblats,
yeah.
The Oblats, yeah. It's very, very famous. It's like Meadowbank, I suppose, over here. We have the National Arena in Tala, but then the Oblats is almost like it's its own thing. It's very,
I saw the National Arena and played in the National Arena. Was it a year past the Dublin Masters? So it had been 2019.
Yeah.
And we played a game on the Sunday morning in the old hall, which was quite eerie. A Sunday morning with about 5 people on the bleachers, with guys over 50 who were struggling to walk. But it was nice being back in the old hall. It certainly hadn't lost any of its mystique.
Yeah, it has charm, that. Yeah, it's a very kind of unique looking gym, and just kind of has a nice, a great feel to it. It's kind of from a different era and stuff like that. So it's good. Yeah, we were very fortunate this year. I played a season, and our team got to the cup final, and we got to play in the gym, and it was great. It was just fantastic.
Great memories. Great memories.
I should probably bring up. I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up the final against well, I mean, it was university stuff, but it was the
home countries.
Home countries, yeah, 2007. good memories from that, because I suppose the lads might watch this and they want us to mention that. Like I had great memories from that, and to be honest, even though it was a universities tournament, I was very I don't know, very fond memories of the team and just the whole experience. And I mean, that's how I met you, and obviously, like,
Yeah, you were a Scotsman for a few weeks, Mark.
I was Scotsman for a few weeks. I was just saying, I felt like the guy from Braveheart, the Irish guy.
No, it was actually excuse me, it was actually nice. I mean, I enjoyed it because it was end of season. Um, Whatever I was doing to that point, um, I was asked year after year to come back and do it. First couple of years, I did it with a good friend of mine, Alan Lamb, and then latterly with another good friend, Stuart Glass, who would have been the guy on the sideline with me at the time. And it was, we never knew what we were getting because all you
Sure.
could do with limited resources was to pitch out an invite to an open training session trial, which effectively what it was, as you know, sometimes we would get, I don't know, I mean, 60 plus guys rock up on a Saturday on a double court. And, we were going around just trying to put faces to names and trying to run a session where we could, in some way, shape, or form, whittle it down to a reasonable number. And then I think from memory that you'll correct me, but I don't think we had any more than maybe 3 or 4 sessions. And, I think from then, the one thing I'd learned was that you wanted to get guys who had an ability, but guys who had the right attitude and guys that you think that could, you could galvanize them, that people could bring different things to the table. And it wasn't necessarily about maybe the guys that could do certain things, but it was a gut. We'd no real time to assess it. It was a gut thing. And did we make some mistakes along the way in terms of selections? Probably. Um, did we do the best job we could in the time that we could? Yeah. Did we have some good guys like yourself? And along those, I think it was 9 years that we did it in a row. We had some
9
really good
years.
guys that came in, Scottish guys, Irish guys, Americans, some guys up from England, Lithuania. And all we did was try to galvanise them and said, listen, we're going to push you for a few sessions, work you hard, we're going to demand certain things. And again, I think I maybe coached the way I played. I didn't ask, you know,
Yeah.
too much of people that I certainly wouldn't have placed on myself. And I think at the sideline, you become a frustrated player rather than a heads-on coach. And I think
Yeah,
I've mellowed a
exactly.
bit over the years. I'd like to think so, but no, we had a great bunch of guys. You contributed greatly to that, and it was set up perfectly for the final game. And I think we all believed we could do it. I certainly we all worked very hard, and certain things went away on the day, but we worked hard, and overtime came along. And was I sad to beat England? Not in the slightest. We'd got close many times before. We were always competitive,
Yeah, yeah.
but it was great to get over the line, and you guys got a great reward for all your efforts and hard work. And I'm sure you guys enjoyed it as much as we did. So
Yeah, no, it was brilliant. And I just because I had a lot of coaches then and since, and I've seen a ton of coaches, and it was just interesting to be coached by because he turned up to the trials. I don't know if you remember this. You may or may not. I mean, you might say that every single team you get. I don't really know. Maybe not. But he turned up and he had us all on the baseline. I don't know if you remember this at all. But you were like, he, maybe it's because we were at that kind of age where there would seem to be a lot of egos around the place, or whatever. A lot of guys that were the best player on their university team, and they're all able to score, and had been selected to go to this trial. And then you said, I don't know where you guys have played or where he played against, but let me tell you right now, I've played against better. Start off like that. And then Andy Stephen, I think, told me like a couple of trainings in, he's like, I don't know why he says that stuff. And I was like, I think he's trying to just make us realize that we're not the amazing players that we think we are. We're playing in Scottish university level. And it's only when I was older I kind of got that, forced that, or that, looking back in retrospect, it's easy to see that now. But it was just funny how you opened up with that, and I was a bit taken back by it at the time. I was like, yeah, why is he saying that? I don't really understand. But I
I
can kind
think,
of see that now. Do you
yeah,
remember
I mean, I
saying
think
that? Do you remember saying
I do remember saying it, and I'll be honest, I've said it quite a few times
that?
in my time.
So other
There,
guys have
I,
heard
I've,
that.
I've said quite a few things that I regret that I wish I hadn't said, but there's also, funny enough, certain things that you say that I've picked up from people before me that then people pick up from me, and then
You hear
you
them.
hear it said, and you're never offended by it. But I think it was also important that we didn't know. We knew, you always knew certain people like yourself and Andy. There's guys that you knew around from seeing them play in National League and speaking to coaches, and you know. And I made an effort to try and get out and see some games, and try to do what I could in advance of, making some selections. But there was also that unknown, because you didn't know how people were going to react to you, to myself and Stuart. And I just wanted guys that just wanted to play hard and win. Would we be the best team on the day? Maybe not. But when you step between the white lines, we've all heard it before. Just leave it out there, and I suppose that was one of the things that we try to use as a benchmark to select guys. And I'd like to think we got it right more than we got it wrong. And certainly that year, I'm not saying we got all the selections right. There were certain guys that didn't play enough a lot of minutes, but I think that even the guys down 11 and 12 made a contribution, and we were a team. And I think we gave you a bit of belief. But you guys, you know, that's the frustrating player part in you, because you can stand at the sideline, you can X all you want, just go play. Give you a bit of leadership, give you a bit of X and O, give you a bit of structure. But the key thing for me is just give you a bit of belief, and go and work hard, and see how the deck is split. And it was great kudos, because you guys competed and improved every game, and you started to believe. And I genuinely think that very quickly in England game you felt you could turn them over, and okay, it took to overtime, but
Yeah.
it's part of history, so it's not been done since. So I'm pleased and proud of that, as you guys should be as well. So, but it was always enjoyable.
Yeah, yeah. There was something nice about it, just because there wasn't a lot of pressure on it, but it was still good to kind of get over a hump that seemed to be
Yeah,
there, just because it was my passing through uni time, and to do it was quite nice. And I had a really good chemistry on the team, and it left really fond memories of me playing basketball in Scotland. So for me, it was just a really, really nice memory. And yeah, the halftime speech was pretty good too. It was Braveheart level stuff. I remember, and being an Irishman in Scotland, it did feel like I was kind of in some kind of a Braveheart situation. He gave
yeah.
a
I
very
think
rousing speech.
we had I can't remember the American guy. The American guy, the kind of muscle bound guy
Yeah, I
that
forgot.
rocked up.
Totally forgotten his name
Um,
now.
and he was a competitor. We knew that he was a bit rough around the edges, because clearly he had played, but he came along the trial and was almost apologising about how bad he was at the beginning of the practice.
That's right. Yeah, I remember that.
And half an hour in, Stuart and I were saying, this has played before. Clearly he's a bit muscle bound, and he's not played much. And I think you guys probably felt the same. You maybe knew him better than I did at the time. But I turned to Stuart and said, unless things change dramatically in the next 2 hours, that guy's going to play, because he's one of these guys that, go in for 2 or 3 minutes, and can you stop number 5 getting the ball? Can you rumble this guy about physically? Again, he was one of these guys that would tick some boxes. And to be fair, from that first trial, the one thing that stuck out was when he came back for maybe the third or fourth session, he was to his word. He'd got in the gym, he'd got some shots up, he'd worked on his game, and you could see that his
Passion was there.
sharpness had came back, and he was a factor. He wasn't the main factor, but he certainly was a cog in the wheel, and did a really good job for us.
Yeah,
And he was a nice guy. He was a really nice guy, and he fitted in with you guys. I think he drank as much as you guys as well. So
yeah, he definitely did. I can't remember his name now, to be honest.
I
They were
can't
talking
remember
about
his
it in the
name
group.
either.
Yeah.
Yeah. But he's
Yeah,
a
it
nice
was
guy.
great times.
Nice
Yeah,
guy.
it was
Nice
a great
guy.
team, great times. Just good
Yeah.
memories for me.
Yeah.
Um,
Me too.
God, there's probably a ton of other questions here, but I'm going to have to probably leave it at that, Ian. But
Okay, that's
th-
cool.
th- there's probably another episode in it, I'd say. Maybe get you a bit further down the line and go into some
Sure,
of the other stuff about Murray International and things like that. But just to
no
say
problem.
thanks for coming on,
No,
and
you're welcome.
it's been great to catch up because I mean I haven't seen you in a long time, and I plan on doing a trip over to Scotland now. Well, probably next year now at this point because
Okay.
the mess that is the international flights and stuff like that. But
Yeah, well,
yeah,
if you're around and you fancy a beer, let me know. I live just not far away from the Glasgow side of things, and it's always good to catch up with b-ball people. And likewise, hopefully, maybe next year the Dublin Masters will be back on, and I'll be back over with our over 50s team. So it's always great to get. We're still hoping that Galway might happen this year,
is there
which is November, first weekend in November. But again, it's a bit sketchy.
is that the
Uh,
Masters been held
that's
in?
the Galway Masters, yeah, which is
Okay.
is a great tournament and always well supported. And but we'll have to wait and see how things pan out in the next few weeks. But no, reach out to me. I'll maybe try and find some game tape and some
Yeah.
other stuff for you to look at and reach out and we can do it again, Mark. But it's nice to speak to you, and thanks for calling. So
Yeah, no, really appreciate you coming on. And as I said, yeah, if you have any game tape and stuff, send it on, and we can maybe do another episode and chat about some of the other
okay, cool.
parts of your journey. Brilliant.
All right,
All right,
okay,
thanks
Mark.
a million.
All right.
Cheers.